Jaunās mūzikas festivāls ARÄNA. Saklausi nākotni.
Man ir liels prieks jūs iepazīstināt ar Tomēr, komponists no apvienotās karalistes, kurš gan jau ilgus gadus strādā Stuttgartas augstskolā, un mums bija prieks ar viņu jau sastrādāties vienreiz. Tas bija 2007. gadā, kad viņš bija kā Erasmus apmaiņas programmā ieradies šeit no Stuttgartas augstskolas, un arī viņš piedalījās festivālā ARÄNA ar savu skaņdarbu. Jā, tas viss notika 2007. gadā, tā kā šī ir priekš viņa otrā reize. Es viņu atceros kā ļoti labu lektoru, kā ļoti interesantu komponistu, un arī, man viņš arī ļoti saistās ar to, ka viņš ir uzrakstījis grāmatu par Jonathan Harveyu Faktī, kas ir viens no maniem mīļākajiem skaņdarbiem mūsdienu mūzikas. Tā kā ļoti daudzpusīga un interesanta personīga Džons Palmers, un viņš lūdzu jūs nākt mazliet tuvāk, jo viņam esat ļoti vienturi tur.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Yolanta. Thank you, the administration. Thank you, Rollins. I'm always happy to be here. I don't know why, but there is something very special in this place. And it's funny because in 2007 I said to Rollins, I have the feeling I will be back. And there I am. Thank you for coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about some important issues regarding contemporary music and listening. The title I was given was How to Listen to Contemporary Music. Now obviously this is a very big topic. It's very complex. It has become very complex since the beginning of a huge science that is called psychoacoustics or sound perception, sound cognition. So it is not easy to try and squeeze so much information into 20, 30 or a little bit more minutes. Anyway, I'm going to give you a few musical examples as well. Many of them, most of them, are related to the concerts that will take place tomorrow night at the Canepes Center. So please come, because I'm trying to use this lecture for you to help understanding or perceiving or listening better to the music you will hear tomorrow. First of all, listening. As I said yesterday, listening has become a huge and sometimes problematic discipline. Sometimes it's good to start from very basics. You see the tripartition, this triangle. And what it says is something very simple. Music really needs three elements, three pillars in order to be such. These are composition, performance, and listening. You take one of them out and it doesn't work. So you compose in order to be performed, in order to be listened to. You can only listen to music that is performed, and the music that is performed has been composed. So this is the main point, the beginning really for our discussion tonight. Of course there are other activities. There's musicology, there is analysis, there is aesthetics and all that, but they are derivative from this very, very important situation. Now, I would like you to close your eyes for a moment. You may not do so, but it would be nice if you did. And try to imagine a wonderful midsummer night on the Latvian Baltic Sea, and there's a starry sky. You see a billion of skies, and you listen, you hear, rather than listen, this. you open your eyes, it's no longer midsummer, it's now autumn, and you've heard a piano. It was a piece written in 1975, and what you will tell me is, oh no, here he goes again, this is very modernistic music, music that is difficult to hear, and may even put some people off. There is a reason why I'm starting with that. The reason is the first big topic of tonight, the context. One of the problems that we have with modernistic music is the difficulty to identify a context. The reason is simple. We are, of course, used to 250 years of tonal music, which we have in the blood, in the genes, if you like. It's a music that we really don't need much to know about. We just understand it, we feel it. It's music based on emotions. It's music based on, and this is very important, linearity. A linear melody, a melody that unfolds, usually, especially at the beginning, within a singable and singing range, which means it makes it easy for us to sing, and it makes it easier for our brain to relate to. Of course, with the formula of that tonal music, classical tonality, which is the cadence 1-4-5-1, you all know that. We have established the emotional basis for the understanding of that music. So we really have it, that's why I said we have it in the genes, in the blood. When we, of course, transfer the problem or the question to contemporary music written in an idiom which has departed from that logic, we are facing a problem. We are facing a double problem when it is a music that has been predetermined, such as the example you heard, from a non-musical situation. You remember I asked you to imagine the starry sky in a beautiful night in Latvia. This was a music that John Cage composed like this, briefly. He took a star map, he put a transparency on the top of it, and he marked each star on a stave. So he tried to reproduce a certain star map in the sky onto sounds. It's called Etude au Star, 1975, book 1. So it is a music that really doesn't, it's not based on emotions, it's not based on a logic, on a linearity which we are accustomed to. It's a music that challenges us, of course, because it's what it's telling us is to look at this beautiful sky and look at it, you know. Okay, yes, we can see billions of stars, but there's a problem. The problem is this, that either we take the invitation of Cage in this example, or in this case, it's not the only one, of course, who worked that way, to just abandon the old way of thinking or of listening, and just let us be surprised by some non or extra musical reality which we hear with sounds, without commenting it, of course, which is not very easy, because we still imagine the sky. When we look at the sky, at least please tell me if you do the same, in the beautiful Latvian beach, I try to find out, oh look, there may be, look what a beautiful star, the polar star. Oh, there's so big, oh look, there's another one, looks like that. Oh, look at that geographical or geometrical shape. Oh, look, there's another one there that is like that or similar to that. So what I'm trying to do, and I'm sure you too, is trying to find connections between this billion of stars, billion of notes, if you like. Now, the greatest revolution of psychoacoustics is just that. With psychoacoustics, which is also called sound perception, which is also called sound cognition, we are trying to understand the way the brain, which means we, listen to music. And another important point is we listen to music according to two factors. One is called segregation, so we tend to separate events in order to differentiate them. Or like saying, okay, this is one, this is tonica, this is dominant, this is subdominant, for example. Yes? And the other way is to group the information we listen to together. And so separation or integration. There's a famous example there that is called the cocktail party. The cocktail party is great. It's something I really advise you to experiment. Go to a restaurant and try to listen to all the conversations that are taking place simultaneously within that space. You will see that after 20 seconds you think, oh, I'm going mad, it's impossible. So you're trying to segregate what are they talking there? What are they talking over there? And you will see that you'll have problems listening to two different conversations already. Imagine 4 or 5 conversations. And the other mode of listening is the cumulative, the grouping together of all the information and listen to this chaotic music, or just music, as in the case of Cage, as he would put it, just by accepting like this. But the problem still remains the neurology of the listening mechanism. We do tend biologically to create contexts. So this is the big problem, in my opinion, that we all have when we listen to contemporary music based on an atonal idiom. The examples you heard was a music without connections, so double difficult to relate to. But of course, not all atonal or modernistic music is like that. There is music that is, as you know, well structured, where within the atonal idiom, you can hear the structures very well. Sometimes perhaps not that well, but in any case, we can go quite far. I'm going to show you a second chart I prepared for you, where I try to put together all the most important elements we are facing, we have to listen to when we are facing music, when we're listening to music. On the upper row, you'll find level 1, pitch, the 5 main elements of music. Pitch, time, timbre, loudness, and space. You will find a sub-level, sorry for that, sub-level 1.1, which is the sub-categorization, if you like, so more specifically the music factors of these 5 main elements. In the case of pitch, as you all know, melody, harmony, register, range, the tessitura, the polyphony, the homophony, and so forth. Time, timbre, loudness, space. You see also a second level, level 2, form, articulation, phrase, density. Now if you take those 9 points already, this is a hugely complex situation, because it's virtually impossible for us to actually really listen to all those elements, the grouping that our brain tends to do. So you can imagine, it is really a straining situation. The most interesting thing is coming down here. You see context. Now, from that moment, that is the actual character of the music, down to the interpretation of the music, which you know well can be hugely different according to the interpreter. We are facing here, so we imagine we are here. Here is our head, our 2 ears. We are listening to all this huge amount, myriad of information, and we're trying to make sense of it, the context. We're trying to find a context that we can relate to. But the context has to go through something else, another crucial element that we all need to have, which is meaning, which is understanding, putting together as many of those elements as possible, make an understanding out of that, memorizing it, which is hard. Why is it hard? Because music is an art that develops in time. So, 10 seconds later, 20 seconds later, I have to remember what I heard 10 seconds earlier, and put it together. That's very hard to do. And the expectation. The expectation, I go back to tonality, the cadence, 1, 4, 5, 1, it's all clear. Okay, I can have a false cadence, a secondary dominant, but we all know that its course is going to end up to 5, 1 at some point. Here, with a free a kind of tonality or atonality or pantonality, it gets more complex, of course. So this is for me the crucial point for listening to music of any kind, actually, but particularly to music written from Schoenberg to today. This is why I call it the cognitive meta level. Cognitive in terms of cognition, we want to understand what is going on. Yes? Because still we are emotional creatures, aren't we? Yes, we are. So we are constantly trying to get relationships between the sounds that are played to us. Now, I'm going to play now to give you two examples, two main topics here. The breaking example, which is related to the breaking of melodic linearity. Just to give you an audible example of how much the destruction of that linearity can actually not put us off, but confuse us completely. I'm going to play to you something. I'd like you to just listen to it first without looking at any graphic representation. And here I come. No, it's not Pro Tools. Is my voice all right? Can you all hear me well? All right. Listen to this example. How many people know the piece? Put your hand up, please.
The same?
The same?
First one.
No. I bet with you all know the piece. Now listen to this. Shall we bet? Listen to the melody. You're trying to understand, you're trying to hear the original melody again. Of course. Did it work? Could you hear the original Beethoven tune? No. How many could do so? Half. Two halves. 3 halves. All right. Well, I can play you an intermediate phase, which is easier than this. This is step 1A for you. Of course, by visualizing it, you are going to have an easier life. It helps. But it's about listening. Yes, you did, no, didn't you? Why? Why did you do it now? Do you know why? Because the rhythm was the same. The rhythm structure was already there. We knew it, so it made it very easy, of course. In the first example, I destroyed the original rhythm, and of course that expanded rhythm horizontally, of course, in time, and the expanded range of the pitch has made the same music almost impossible to recognize. Only a trained person would know the trick, if you like. Now, the trick, I think, is interesting. Don't you think so?
Yes.
And tomorrow night, one of my piano pieces, 3 preludes, especially the first prelude, has been composed by using this technique, whereas the original, it was a tonal prelude I had written myself. Still very romantic, late romantic. So be prepared to that. But you've seen the tremendous difference and the tremendous importance of the manipulation of time. I call it time compression and reduction. Compression or reduction or expansion. Yes? And this is one of the most important elements that make new non-tonal music very often difficult for us to listen to. So we always think it's the atonality in itself. No, it's not only that. You see now why. So why did I play this example to you? To show you the importance, going back to the chart at the beginning, the importance of those elements. If you remember, here, what I've done was just a manipulation of that element. Pulse, metron, rhythm, and the pitch structure. Whereas the pitch was always the same. I just changed the register. In the first example, the range, and the register, of course, was smaller. In the second example, was much larger, wider, so thus for us more difficult to relate to. So this is also what we call space. So space, or the sense of space, yes, in terms of the relation of duration value, which can be a note, which can be a rest, yes, and rhythm, and register. I have to stop there for that, because of time restriction. The second example is related to that. It has got a focus on rhythm. We often listen to rhythm and by concentrating our focus on the actual rhythmic structures. We all tend to do that. Listen to this example. is called incidental. I have an excerpt of the score here. I have a lot of examples, of course, but time is short, and I have to be very selective. Now, this is the theme of the piece you just heard. It's called Incidental, and it's a piece from a piano work called Musica Reservata. It's going to be played tomorrow night as well. And it's a very rhythmic piece. It's short. All pieces of Musica Reservata are relatively short, 2 to 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. No, some are longer actually, but a lot of them are 3 minutes long. And tomorrow you will hear 3 of them actually. So this is the theme. It's a very rhythmic theme, and it's the classic situation where we just plunge into the rhythm itself, which is not necessarily the wisest thing to do. Let's say that a short analytical situation. So we've got 2 elements there. The first phrase, the second phrase, there, number 1. And the second element, which is the rests, the space in between. We have a tendency in our Western tradition to neglect the power of rests. One of the most beautiful things of Japan, Japanese classical music, is the sense they have for the ma. They call it ma, M-A, the space that is sounding between 2 notes, but without notes, what we call silence or rest. The whole piece here is based on this contrasting fight, if you like, contrasting dialogue between the rhythmic asymmetric structure, taka taka taka, taka, and the rests. What if we, instead of concentrating the listening to the pitch structures first, we just try to concentrate our listening to the rests? What will happen is that we will get to hear the rhythmic structures, the pitch structures, in a different way. It's almost like working with perspective. And I would like you to try that. Is it okay if I give you a little task to do? I just want to make it as dynamic as possible. This is the first page, so you see again the theme there, and you see the texture of the piece. And you see the rests occurring everywhere, they're always present, but you see also a third important element, which is harmony, like there, like there, like there. Yes? And this harmony is also has got a double value. It's harmonic, of course, but it's also resonance. So there are 3 elements here that are playing together: the rhythmic pitch structure, the rests, and the resonances. So you may say, okay, very well, good, that is clear, we can see it clearly here. Actually, you see I've made another note for us down there. The asymmetry comes back every time some motivic, yes, examples or recollections of the theme reoccurs. And you see the same 3, basically the same 3 elements always at stake. Now, I would like to just listen to the same 45 seconds, just as a little exercise, and see if anything has changed by just focusing not on what we think is apparent, which is the rhythm. Of course, the rhythm is apparent, but just try to get into the rhythmic structure through the rests and through the resonance. Yes, and the harmony. And perhaps you may enjoy the jazzy element of it. stop there. I understand there will be a discussion afterwards, so if you like, and I'd be very happy to hear any feedback in that sense. I'll go to the final point. The final point is a very tricky one and wonderful. The emancipation of timbre. With that, I think the only real revolution in the 20th century has been the birth of electronic music. And with electronic means, we have really seen a complete revolution of the way we listen to sounds and of the way of composing sounds. That's why the example I'm going to give you tonight is an example of so-called acousmatic. That means music. That means music written in the electronic studio and to be performed by 2 or more channels on stage, in the concert hall. Tomorrow you will listen to the premiere of a piece, an acousmatic piece of mine called Present Otherness. I'm going to show you some examples. Present Otherness is a piece that is based on trumpet recordings by Markus Stockhausen. I was invited, in fact I was commissioned by Jonathan Harvey to write a piece by using the samples of the studio of Markus playing the trumpet. Of course it was a huge, long piece. I decided to just go to the essential. I chose only 9 single pitches. One of them I play to you. Only. It's the very one you just heard. I'll play it. So I just wanted to be really minimal and minimalistic. I thought 2 elements is enough. I decided to look into the spectra of the 9 selected pitches. You see there, selection, A flat, G flat, and so forth, and to just work with the spectral information, the harmonic series of each single note. Because the spectrum is, for me, a very intriguing thing. It's a very human, very spiritual force, because it's the inner part of the sound. So I symbolize it with the inner part of myself. But this is not an intellectual speculation. This is how I always felt sounds of that kind. I was always flabbergasted to hear all these spectral transformations. I really felt, wow, that feeling of goose skin. And so for me, a spectral transformation has got a very, very strong meaning that is very human. And the whole piece is based on that. I've prepared for you a short chart just to give an idea of the piece. In the center you will see here trumpet. This is the only musical element, the 1 note, the 9 notes, and the phrase you just heard. And I decided to use contrast. So you see on the left-hand side, I'll try to scroll up and down a little bit, very high. So try to use contrast at the extremes as a musical parameter, if you like, element, compositional element, by pushing everything to a very high, almost inaudible, and a very low sound. Because I was intrigued by see how far I can stretch the boundaries of the listening experience in musical terms. Another important element is the sense of distance. You see the perpendicular axis here, which is the very near, present, and the very far, the otherness. Yes, present otherness. And of course, using these 2 axioms in terms of articulation of timbre, which is the main thing, the main, also compositionally speaking, technique. So in a piece like this, of course, we have to forget all our sense of tonal music, all our sense of directionality, direction of melody, because the composition itself is focused on another element, which is the very core of one sound. So it is an invitation of looking into oneself, actually. This is something I usually don't say, and composers don't like to talk about things like that. I don't mind, because we're all humans. If you ask me, why did you write that? I'm quite happy to tell you, yes, I wrote it for that reason, and that has that very meaning for me, of course. I don't want you to assign the same meaning to it, but I think it's fair on you to understand, okay, what did it mean? Why? So, the listener here, so this is the main field, the articulation of timbre, in terms of spectral articulation and transformation. When I say articulation, I mean it in a broad sense. Articulation in everything, again, expansion, compression, spectral variation. So what I did there was quite simply going back to the overtone, to harmonic series of each of those sounds, and trying to and mixing them in order to create an ambiguity of pitch. Of course, we can still sing the melody, but if we listen carefully, we realize that there are 3 or 4 hidden melodies as well, and this is the beauty of spectral manipulation. So it's creating the ambiguity, like saying, on a philosophical term, who am I? I thought I was a good person, but am I really that good? Okay, just to understand. So, another example is the phrase you just heard at the very beginning, which is the beginning and the end. I go back to that. You see down there? Very low and very low, the gesture at the beginning and at the end. And this is, as I said at the beginning, the contrast, one of those contrasting actions I had to take to bring everything down and to do what in compositional terms is granular stretching of the sound and create this kind of rhythm or sub-rhythm, which is here. Another example of more timbral spectral combinations. This is actually one of the few moments in the piece where you can hear it's a trumpet. There is a trumpet or a trumpet-like sound. Yes? In fundo, an example from the actual file I will play tomorrow from this mixture of various spectra together. It's again very soft, intentionally soft, because of course each part of the harmonics is also softer. Yes, we perceive it as softer as the fundamental note we're talking about. So even if we combine it, we're talking about a micro level, which of course wants us to be very, very particularly attentive to what is happening. and so forth. I don't want to play it all because you have to come tomorrow. I have finished. There are only two things I would like to say very shortly. I have shortly published a book on rhythm to go, exercise for students. Try and get rhythm into the blood. If you are interested in that, you can find it on the website. Maybe you may like to use it here for your students. And the second thing is that it is for me a particular pleasure that I believe an excellent, fabulous pianist will be playing my music tomorrow. This is Heloise Palmer, who happens to be my wife. I'm very lucky. She's here with us, and she's one of the best pianists I've ever heard in 55 years. So please come to the concert because you will hear top-class piano playing, and also because it's my birthday. Thank you very much for listening.
Questions right away about the things we just heard?
I have a question. You said that it's important to have a context listening contemporary music.
No, it's not important.
No.
No, we need
Yes.
instinctively.
Then we need like an introducer every time when we come to the concert.
You see, if we had 2 hours, I would tell you much more. In my opinion, one of the cracks about contemporary music in general is the lack of information. If I give you the information, you will start listening to the music in a different way. For example, I could show you the beginning of the piece Eulogy, which I wrote for the death of Jonathan Hardy, which is going to be performed tomorrow, which is a spectrum on the piano. It's a spectral piece on the piano. C, E, G, B flat, C, D, E, F sharp. If you know that, I actually have an example here which plays very short, of course you will listen to the piano music in a spectral way, which is very unusual. So the information is crucial, yes, absolutely. So the next question may be, how can we do that? By creating events like this, where you ask composers to talk and discuss with people. That's what
The next question, how to make composers talk.
Yes, that's a more difficult one. Most of the composers I know don't like to talk about issues like that. I even know 2 very famous composers in the UK who, when they finish the composition, in the sketches, they into the bin. They don't want us to know the techniques they've used to write the piece, which is very harsh. The musicologist who has to do make an analysis of the piece, well, they have a huge problem there, you know. So not many composers like to do that, but particularly composers tend not to talk about the soul, the mind. For me, it's the same. That is particularly tricky. So yes, that is difficult. But don't ask me how can we change that. I can change it in my small way by just telling you honestly what my music, what I do means to me, which does not mean that must be the same to you, but you will certainly understand what I'm trying to say. You may like it, you may not like it, you may whatever, but at least you know what's going on and why it's going on. So of course composers need to be helpful there. I believe strongly in that.
Yeah, maybe I will make some note about this as a composer. I think for me it's always a very big difficulty to write the program notes. And I try to defend my position. It's somehow that, of course, as any composer, I have some initial idea of how I start to work. But when I create, I do so many adjustments. So, looking objectively at the end, what happened to the material, I can't say that this initial idea is still working there. It's something else which I created in the end. And I can't explain exactly what it is what I created. It's something else that I did in the end. So for me, the program notes an explanation of what I meant and how I did this it's really tricky.
Yeah.
And I want to be also honest in a way.
Yes, yes. Well, Jean-Jacques Nattier calls that the poetic level. That is the moment of we create we conceive the music, we create the music. And it is very tricky, it's the most difficult one. Of course, program notes are tricky because there are two kinds of program notes. One that is very technical, academic. I did this form A, B, C, C1, C2B, I did that and that, but it's very boring. I mean, people don't want to know that. In my experience, people love music. They go to a concert because they want to feel something. They want to be moved, touched by music. So I think it's more interesting to try and write about what it means to me. But it's tricky, of course. First of all, do I have the courage to do so? And if I did, how am I going to verbalize it? That's difficult. My program notes are sometimes technical, especially the first ones. I try to become more elusive because I like that. I want to give, no, I don't have it here, the piece hieroglyphs, which is similar to incidental. Actually, I can show to you a program note which you may find interesting indeed. Tomorrow, another piece of mine, very rhythmic, similar to incidental, is going to be played. It's the second piano piece I wrote, and the program note goes like this. It's 1.5 line. You may laugh if you like, but you may be very serious too. ARÄNA, the sweet it was. 12 hieroglyphs speaking from the past, symbols to the mind, the scarab and Carl Gustav Jung. Now, of course, you will say this is extremely esoteric. I mean, hell, what does it mean? There is his own symbology, his own mythology. Yes, there is. And it wasn't easy for me to write it. I created the program note 24 years later because the piece had to wait 24 years to be performed, to be premiered by my wife, by the way. So the first program note was, I tried to imagine 12 hieroglyphs, to visualize them. So you will hear 12 hieroglyphs, 12 chords, the exposition, and then you hear them in a variation form. The academic, yes? Okay, I mean, any intelligent listener will hear that anyway. Of course, you may say this is the other extreme. Who's going to hear that? But at least you have some information. Carl Gustav Jung. Okay, the archetypes, the symbolism of the archetypes. So I'm giving you hints. There may be, and I'm sure there's a middle way between that. But program notes, I find, may be helpful to those who really are trying to get some of that kind of information. But they're not easy, I agree with you. It's hell for me. When someone, please give the program note, it's the most difficult thing to do.
Especially if you're late with the piece.
Yes, especially if you're late with the piece. Exactly.
So do you think there should be like a course to study like for composers self-explanation?
Self-explanation? Yes. In what sense? That's a nice question. What do you mean self-explanation?
Like to teach composers how to explain themselves.
Oh yes, I do so. I think there should be a course for teaching composers how to behave nicely. Behavior, general manners, good manners. To be more altruistic. Because 80% of the composers I know are big egos. And to be more social. And I think music is, after all, a social experience, isn't it? And I think we need that kind of visionary altruism to support each other. Support each other to understand music, to exchange music, to discuss music as we're doing now. So yes, I think composers may be very specialized in one kind of work, very technical, but they lack a lot of other very important human and also sometimes intellectual, I must say, aspects of life.
Would you come to teach?
Would I come to teach? Here. Yes. I love Riga, so yes.
So perhaps this is one point we would all agree that there should be more explanation, more communication of what composer intended, but what else could be useful for people who are not acquainted with contemporary music, how to approach it? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the last examples I gave you, when I went into electroacoustic music, and how many of you know about spectrum? Or how many of you don't know about spectrum? Okay, so the majority of you does know, okay. But usually it's a tricky point. When it comes to electronic music, people go, ooh, like that, because they don't understand, they don't know what the dialectic of the piece is. I think one important thing is to explain, look, and also what I did, after all, I gave you a piece of information which was very intimate. I told you that the spectrum for me is a very spiritual experience. It's like being naked in front of you. Because I'm telling you, talking about my soul. That's what composers don't like doing. But at least I'm giving you something you can make you think. And there's a lot of spectral music that really goes into, you feel, it's so beautiful, it speaks from within. Yes? And it is an experience which for me is not at all intellectual. I feel it. Yes? So if I can tell you that, perhaps you may feel it as well. I don't know, of course, everyone is different. But I know many people who may come to me and say, thank you, you've opened the door. And I think that is important. So timbre, I think, is a very important thing to talk about, because we don't have that kind of education. We are educated in terms of pitch structure. Yes, chords and melody and rhythm, that's it. So timbre has become extremely important today. And I think there should be more of that. Do you think so as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Try to fill the gap here by both analyzing and trying to write also something with this. Maybe just sketches sometimes, but anyway. It's
one general observation from my side. I concluded that I can more or less satisfactorily explain what does it mean invertible counterpoint.
Invertible
counterpoint, for example, theme and variation. For example, functions of harmony, 1, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so on. But I cannot find nowhere and can explain by myself what generally means the term the music.
You can't find information on the meaning of music?
No, I can't find satisfactory formulation of the subject music.
What music is?
What music is, yes. But
there is a wonderful book. It's about 567 pages long in English by Roger Scruton. It's about aesthetics of music. It's the discourse of music. It's not the only one. It's just what comes to me straight to my mind. It's a book I would recommend anybody because it's all about that. But what you're saying here is in terms of general discussion, also in terms of education, teaching. Yes. Well, you probably do this yourself, don't you? You try to.
Canadian explorer Robert Jordan, the music Brain and Ecstasy.
Yes.
It's trying to explain what does it mean music for us generally. But no success to get a good answer.
about what music is.
Yeah.
Of course, that is a huge, it's fascinating topic. I agree with you. But you have to have the people who want to listen to that, of course. That's usually a kind of more intellectual audience. I think it's very important. Because what is music? Why do we do music? Why are we here? Why did you bother to waste your time and come here and listen to me? Why will you be coming tomorrow and so forth? I mean, there is something there that is the very core of why we all make or listen to music. And it's a wonderful subject. I'm all for it.
But to answer this question takes probably all our lifetime.
Yes.
With no success.
And that's why, yes, there may not be success, ultimate success, but the fact that we can discuss it, because we change, you know. When I came here in 2007, I was a different person, I was a different composer. Now it's 7 years, so you've changed. In 5 years' time, you will be a different person. So we change, our perception of music changes, we all grow. And the beauty of discussing through time, through age, is that we can always discuss about the same topics in a different way. And that is evolution. And that is exchange of experience on a practical studio work, on an intellectual, on a human level. But that is very important, I think. And I think that is what music conservatoires should do more often, and that is what they don't do. Or if they do, it's very little. And it's a big, big problem, I think. But there's always a beginning.
What was the reason why you asked about this? You have sort of problem with defining?
I have a problem to understand what does it mean.
So there is
generally. I have explained invertible counterpoint at the piano, but I can explain more generalized questions.
But so I understand that there are some types of music which are giving you this question. Why you?
No, I would like to know definite different opinions about this question. Not only my confusion in all this.
It's very important, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Maybe some other ideas?
Maybe I'm just a bit too structural about this.
Sorry, did you say structural?
Yeah, I am. And I was. So, for example, I go to a concert, right? And there's John Cage, and I don't know that piece. So, to conclude this, how do I listen to the music? So, do I just wait for it to end and go home and then search for information, or think about math and maps and everything? So, how do I do the listening part? So I don't know the piece, you know, I'm at a concert, and I don't know it. So I just wait for it to end, and then go home, and then search for information.
Take your mobile phone and Google. That's the biggest thing you did at a concert.
Well, basically, yes. You know, if you can do that, the more the information you have about the piece, the more you're putting yourself in the position to perceive it better, to listen to it better, perceive it better, and cognitively understand it better. Although I don't think that music is about, the listening process is about understanding, it's about perceiving it. You know, understanding can be a very dry thing. Okay, you understand the music, but it doesn't mean, the understanding factor doesn't necessarily mean that you are perceiving the music. There are, for me, two different things. Of course, they can be combined together. So, yes, use any possibility you have to get the information beforehand. And it's something that grows with experience. I mean, John Cage didn't do this all the time. There are some pieces of his that were written down the old-fashioned way. So, you know, it's like Stravinsky, you know, he wrote in so many different styles, Stockhausen. So you have also to know the language, the idiom, or the idioms of all these very different composers, which is a passion, if you like. You have to love music. It's like to say, well, my hobby is, well, your hobby can be music at a serious level, where you really want to know what composers are trying to say, you get the information, you read about them and the pieces.
If some, maybe I'll ask them. So what do you think, what could we learn from this Bēthovenu example? I was quite struck by this example of changing the timing and the registers and how different it sounds. What could composers and the listeners learn from this? What do you think?
First of all, as I said, what I discovered recently, actually, the last 5 years, and more recently now, that, you know, when people are telling you, oh, I don't like new music, modern music, atonal, I need my tonality, and usually the tendency is to say to them, yes, it's the atonal music, it's chromatic, and we don't like chromaticism. I don't think that is the only factor, because as I've shown you, in the moment where we stretch time structures, we get a very similar result. You didn't know that it was Beethoven, and it didn't sound tonal either. But if you train, that's what we can do. Train, experiment like that. If you train like this, you will begin to listen to a lot of music that use that kind of technique, or certainly wide registers with different ears. Yes? And you can start by taking a beautiful Latvian folk tune. I love Latvian folk music, by the way. 5 notes, very simple. Go to the piano and start spreading the same note with the same rhythm over 2 or 3 different pitches, octaves. It's a fantastic experience. And it suddenly sounds, wow, so but then, meanwhile, you've trained yourself to actually listen, da-da-dee-da-da, yeah? And you can hear it. So that is a very funny and simple way to start practicing that way. It's training also. Have I answered your question?
Yeah.
That's one. I mean, there are other things, of course. But that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And the second, sorry, shortly, it's the importance of time in contemporary music. That's the other point I wanted to make. That a lot of people tend to neglect by focusing on pitch. You've seen by manipulating time what different music we can create. So we should not undervalue that. Yes, Jim?
I just wanted to say that I can relate to what you mentioned about knowing all the details, the mind about these isn't that important always, because, like, for example, I can relate to that also, like, to the music from romantic era. Like, I can just grab some information and know more about a piece, and maybe also it could change my perception, which is the same with the contemporary music. It's just that I was on a concert where there was this audio-visual performance by a Japanese composer. I didn't know him. I didn't even know. Well, I just got a ticket and I just went to this concert, and it was an audio-visual performance. And after that, and after this performance, it was electronic music with visuals. And I talked with my girlfriend, and I told her, well, that was amazing music with some effective visuals. And she said, really? I thought it was like a movie with just a soundtrack. So she perceived better the visuals and I perceived the audio. So what I wanted to say that despite the fact that we didn't know anything about a composer or his idea, whether it was a movie or a composition or two together, we just enjoyed it, and we felt impressed emotionally,
information issue is just one way, for people who don't know, but it doesn't mean it's the only way. If you are sensitive or perceptive enough, as you seem to be not to need the information, well, then you can go a long way, of course. But there's another point you've mentioned, which is also very interesting, is the combination music and visual. That's another big area. How much does the visual world influence our perception of music and vice versa? That's of course an important factor. We have on the one hand film music, of course, which is a big tradition itself. But we have, when you teach listening techniques, one of the things you often say, I do it, and what other colleagues do, is we don't listen only with the ears, we also listen with the eyes. Because meanwhile, in neurology, in psychoacoustics, has been found out that indeed the eyes help us listening better. So, of course, and we do that anyway, because the brain is many, of course, millions of little brains working together, neural networks, but it's also one big coordinator of such networks. So all these elements, say the visual one as well, are going to be the elements that are going to be impressed here. So of course they are very important, and they will have an effect on our perception of the music. Very important point.
I have heard of such an opinion that contemporary music needs more time to work, like afterwards. When you listen and then you go home, and then it's till you get to it. What would you say about that?
I agree. For me, it's easier to listen to Mozart than to listen to contemporary piece, because we, as I said earlier, we have classical tonality in our genes. We have it, we know what it is about. But with music that is based on other parameters, think of this space and register expansion. We need to be a bit more trained, so we need more time to digest the idiom. That's normal. That happens to me as well. And I have no problem in admitting that. Because the neural networks have to get used to that. With Mozart, they already know how. John Cage once said, the history of classical music can be taught like this. It can be taught in 10 minutes. And he was, in a way, he was right, because what he meant was the formula 1, 4, 5, 1. This is classical music. Of course, it's elaborated, expanded, refined, and through that, all the emotional aspects that come with it are already in it, yes, by definition, but we're talking about 250 years, yes, of listening experience, which we don't have with new music. So that is normal, so that it should not discourage you.
So what happens, like we need a lot of time to digest it, but we don't have time nowadays. So basically we have a lot of new music undigested inside ourselves.
Well, new music is also such a big term. What does we mean? Is it our part? Or is it Brian Fernhow? I mean, it's new music, it's completely different. So, that's why when you said to me, how to listen to modern music, Yolanda said, I understood as modernistic music, to be precise, but I think you meant new music, contemporary music, and that is huge, because if you write modern music, of course it's easier for us to perceive it and understanding it, then music is more chromatic. Like it is easier for us to understand Mozart in relation to late Wagner or Strauss because of the chromaticism. Have I answered you?
That was not a question.
There was no question, sorry. What was the question?
No, I didn't have a question.
Oh, you didn't have a question?
So now we have two choices. Whether we find a new topic or we finish. Maybe we can turn somehow. Yes. You wanted to say something?
Yes. I wonder if there's really an essential difference of the awareness of contemporary music and any other kind of music.
What do you mean?
I mean, it was mainly being talked about how do we listen to contemporary music, what makes it so difficult, and why is it, how come it is easier to listen to tonal music, or to understand tonal music or to perceive it. I'm not so sure if that is the case. Not so sure if we are really more enriched, more enlightened when we get out of a normal, a standard solo repertoire of the 19th century, and if it really changed our perception, if it really made something with us, or if that was a recital of 21st century music. So it's not so much the idiom, I think, that is the question, it is the perception per se. Do you understand?
Yes, but perception, it's always you perceive an object, in this case a sonic object. And if you're acquainted to, if I'm acquainted to the sonic object Mozart, I function in a certain way. If I'm less acquainted with difficult chromatic atonal piece, my perception may function differently. Of course, I can't answer that question because it's very personal, but I think the perception is always related to the object that we are relating to.
That's certainly true, but acquaintance does not mean that we have that it gives us a deeper understanding afterwards. As I said, you listen to an entire evening of Bach or Mozart sonatas and you don't hear, you're not any farther afterwards. You go home and you continue your life.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's the question about is it harder for contemporary music to give us something? Because it's not so much, as you said earlier, it's not about understanding. Because when we understand music, the value doesn't increase, not necessarily. It's not about the understanding, it's about what you said, what is music, what does it do to us? So, does contemporary music do more to us or less to us than Mozart? And I don't think this is so easy to answer.
Of course, but there's one point that you remind me to. I have the privilege to know you well, and you're a very highly sensitive and developed musician. So your point is qualitative. You're talking about quality, the quality of perception, of course, but it's a more subject-related. While the point we've been discussing is more on the general level of things. Of course, each of us, you are right, we can be listening to the well-tempered piano clavier by Bach and understanding nothing, of course.
And it's all tonal.
And it's all tonal, and we are supposed to know, of course. But this is a personal matter.
But that is what music is about, eventually. I mean, any art is about to trigger something in us. So it's not about just listening and going home and say, okay, now I know the tune, I can sing it.
Of course. But
we are taking. What does it do to me?
Yes, of course, but we are taking for granted here. I think there was this common understanding that it's about the technicalities at an average level, of course. You're bringing up a subjective level, which is very varying. I can listen to Bach and understand nothing, and you can listen to Bach and understand everything. I'm just being silly here, you know, because my quality, my qualitative, my attentiveness, yes, is not so high, as high as yours, maybe. That is a personal thing. I think we were generalizing, because we all seemed to share a concern about how can we all, so there's a generality there, understand music better, or new music better. And I think we're trying to define common points for discussion. But of course, ultimately, it is about each person working on himself or herself, and to become a really attentive musician, and therefore listen, or an attentive listener, and therefore musician. And that will always be something that is out of our hands. Each one is different. But I believe that also within our own development, that's what I personally, there is a growth process. I mean, I can listen and perceive Bach today better than 20 years ago. I know that. And there's the famous Glenn Gould recording of the Goldberg variation, the first one, the second one. And if you hear them, gosh, you hear it, how much he has changed. The same pianist. But the second one sounds so very different. Do you agree with me? So this was for me a process of growth that he went through, of quality, the same quality you're talking about. So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, from this I know a question. In nowadays, when there is so much like music is also like product of marketing. So how nowadays, when everyone is excellent, we only want the fantastic, the greatest. How to understand what is good and what is not.
Yes, again, we are going away from the quality that Eloise was trying to focus on to the
okay, we know Bach, what is Bach, but there's many contemporary composers that we maybe know, but how can we say that this piece is so great or not?
But again, you bring the points you realize to another level, the level of massification, industrialization of music, and very general perception of music. But you talk about marketing as well, so this is really a tricky, another huge area of discussion, very tricky. Because in most cases, I believe there is no qualitative factor acting in those situations, in the industry. I don't think today's music industry is acting in terms of quality.
That is why I'm asking.
Yes, I know. And you probably want to know how can we change it. Well,
no, I'm not asking how to change it. I just want to know, if I'm a listener, I go to the concert, how can I know, who can tell me?
You mean the marketing also?
I can tell you.
In the
he can tell you.
I can tell. The famous pianist Arthur Schnabel, who wrote by himself a lot of pieces. He was also a composer and wrote atonal music, 12-tone music, and was excited about this and never played his own music, but gave it to ARÄ performance to play, and played mostly Schubert, Bēthovenu, and so on. He said, I cannot prove you why Bach, well-tempered clavier, is better than Irving Berlin songs. I can't prove it. Nobody can.
Yeah.
What is good and what is not so good? Are there definite criterion? I think not. What is simple and what is simple and what is difficult in music? I wrote arrangements for a folk song for professional choir. I used dissonant intervals, counterpoints, and somehow arranged this only modal way, but with some tricky intervals. The most difficult task for this choir was to sing the initial tune, not changed way. Very simple tune. And it came out stiff, artificial, and take a lot of job to be satisfactory. When I created around it dissonant intervals and counterpoints, it became much more easier for them. Nobody can say what is easy, what's difficult, what's good, and what's bad. I can say that my arrangement was better than original folk tune. Probably not. But we're on our criteria.
I understand your point. I don't know if there is...
No, I just wanted to know, like, I can say like that, how to get the map to orient it in this modern or contemporary or new or anything of this.
The audience, the general audience.
Music.
In
How
music.
to, what is the criteria to understand
It's your context which you have to build up somehow. John was talking about this context. We contextualize or we don't contextualize, and every person has a different level in this. But it's also very, I think, sorry, I started to respond to this question, but I think it's also very individual. It's also a question of taste, so it's never objective in the end. But in general, I can, if I hear a piece of contemporary music and it's related to something, if it's not something completely, so it almost never happens. But if I hear it, I can say immediately after 1 minute if it's professional, original. Immediately, I could say, and it's just my context, which is perhaps a little bit higher than the normal average listener. I don't know if there is.
May I say something to that? Because it's something for me it's very important. You have studied it, so you can say, I can detect if this piece is well written, is professional, yes? Because he has studied that particular music, so he knows what the criteria of quality for that particular genre and perhaps style are. One of the things that I find very disturbing in today's society is that a lot of people want to talk about music, or they go to concerts of contemporary music. Most of them, first of all, they don't understand. They may feel abused. They go away, they say, oh, this is rubbish. And that's it. They don't make any effort. But it's like me going to a congress of astrophysics. Imagine. I go there, I sit down, and I say this one. And imagine, what would you think if after 10 minutes I said, oh, it's rubbish. It's all rubbish, these idiots. Physics is physics. I mean, of course, physics has developed into astrophysics and into this and this and that. So I must have some kind of knowledge before I judge. Yes? And that is something that has gone lost, I think, through the huge increase of commercial music. Not much of the commercial music. I write songs myself. But it's the music industry, the commercial music industry, the huge massification of music, which brings everything to music, any kind of music, without quality, to any moment of our life. In the radio, in the restaurant, in the supermarket. So we are bombarded on the mobile phone. We are bombarded with all this information. And if people don't know, they relate to that. So how many billion of people are on the planet? 7 billion? 10 billion? I don't know. But imagine, it's a situation that is out of control, out of hand. Because I do think we need to have a certain knowledge in order to be able to evaluate a piece of music. Of course, not all. There may be people who are very sensitive by nature, who may perhaps not need that much information because they have this inclination to music in the first place, and the information they can get or the knowledge can only help them to get better. But I think this is a big problem of contemporary societies in general.
I've got an addition.
Addition
About what could help the perception of any kind of music, which is, I think, strongly undervalued. And this is semiotics, which is the science of symbolism. I think I'm rather certain about that anybody, any kind of person, to a certain degree, to a certain level, we are talking about who knows more, and then of course there's a higher degree of understanding, but any person reacts to symbols. We all have got symbols. We grow up through symbols and with symbols that may be that may differ from country to country, from different also races, the Asian and the African, such different symbolism. But it's we do react to it, and certain things it almost happens instinctively. Certain things that we see cause something in us, trigger emotions or thoughts or prejudice or whatever. And I think when assigned to a piece of music, like with the opening example, the cage, I did not find it at all off-putting or upsetting, especially because of your introduction. Close your eyes and imagine a starry night. And I saw stars, and that's it. I don't need to combine them. I don't need to see the polar and somehow, astral, zodiac or whatever. I don't need that anymore because I'm quite happy to see a starry night. And just to look at the stars, that's very meditative, or it's very, and that's it. So I can listen to that music and I can actually see stars. So the symbol was astrale from the title. And titles very often give us these symbols. They started in the probably late classic, when the composers were more daring, and it wasn't only sonata and suite, it was then also more inventive titles, but they give us a very clear idea of what to expect, how to interpret a piece of music, how to listen to, and of course we still have our own perception. I do assign other qualities to, let's say, poema than you might do, but there's a common sense. We both know that it will be like a speech. We will think of a narrative music. We won't think of a dance when we think of poema. So symbolism, I think, can be used much more also to get the audience to understand. Also for example, as a performer, I think of from the perception of the performer, how can I help my audience to understand the music that I play? And I've got this responsibility also to give more. It's not the program notes, it's not only the composer who has got the responsibility to help the listener to understand his music. It's also the interpreter, it's also the promoter, the one who organizes the concert. All this, it's about getting the audience into the hall. So I think symbolism helps a lot.
And that's one of the strong things you're doing in your music concerts.
Well, yes, I do it also, but I think that's why I do it, because I'm
and it works, it seems to work.
But I think it does work. I think many people should do it more. And what has been said earlier with the visual, the multimedia helps also because of that. I see something, it triggers something in me. Then at the same time, I listen to a certain kind of sound, and I perceive it much deeper, much quicker, maybe more immediate than without.
Yeah. And particularly important because we live in a visual society, not an auditory one. So in this visual society, of course, we are much quicker with the eyes than with the ears. So the multimedia situation can help the listening mechanism to catch up with the visual mechanism. ultimately they are supposed to work together. But I think the listening mechanisms are still far back.
I completely disagree about the combining of visual mechanisms and audio mechanisms, because most of the time, I'm more from visual world, and most of the time when I see these things in concert, when there is music and there is visual part, then the visual part is most of the time less quality than is musical part, or the other way around.
Yes.
There is very often exhibitions with completely disastrous music. And there we have to be, like both sides, very careful, because we have to keep in mind that to concerts, people from visual world will come and the other way around. And it can also bring you to completely different directions that you expected. Because often I close my eyes not to see the visualizations of the screen and just to hear the music.
Yes. I agree with you. I tell you something, I make a confession here, since we are talking so freely. I've always been suspicious about multimedia, because either I found wonderful images, the visual art, and the music being very poor, which really made me very angry most of the times, or the other way around, as you say. I have been persuaded, convinced to the cause because of Heloise's Muyetic concerts, where she does this in a way that all these multimedia factors, they work, may I say this, you should say this, but for me that was a revelation. Up to that point, I hated the multimedia situation because I always found a discrepancy between these two worlds. And you are the only person that has really convinced me with what you do with the images, with the text, with the theatre, with the music, to understand, okay, in your case it's the music that is the main thing. So there's a focus, which is the music. So the multimedia is there to focus on the music. So it's really particular, but that I find very convincing, because it's about the symbol, as you said, the meaning, I would say, that piece of music had for me, or had in itself, and is conveyed to me. And for me, that's the moment where multimedia as such does work.
Yeah, my point was that whenever one does it, it has to be combined, it has to be the same level, because often what I see is that music can be very abstract, but the visual part is very much narrative, very much like from nature, from all kinds of these cliché things, and it disturbs so much the person which is more from the visual world. So.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's very seldom when someone is doing both. It's very rare. Actually, the Japanese artist the guy was mentioning was the best I've ever seen for blending these two things together. It was a sound artist called Yoshi Ikeda. I don't know if you know.
I know the name.
Yeah, but the thing is, what he does is that the visualization is actually mapped from the sound. So he's mapping to the video what he does with the sound. So it's really strong working together, and I completely disagree with both of you. The one who says that that was not good music with some video, or it was nice video with some music. I would say this was one of the examples where it actually was working together. The both parts were fantastic at that concert, and yeah. But it's true. I myself try to be open-minded. I go to the concert, and if there is some multimedia, okay, I'll live with it. But when I have to judge, I have to say it's really the cases when I see it, it's really weak in this sort of how it's working together.
How you can judge about visual part of this performance?
Okay,
because maybe there will come some famous painter specialist in visual arts and say that's terrible, that's kitsch. Like one famous Latvian painter, very much loved no, very simple songs that are playing during the parties. Sing in the parties together with, like Brīvā, you know. And so he said it's beautiful music, but he was a very refined painter. So I can't judge about visual part of it. Maybe I'm not right, maybe I'm very low and bad taste.
Interesting thing with the guys from Liepāja who are combining and programming together, and it's like a new level of visual and music together, because the synthesis is very like.
I'm suspicious about that.
It's a new media art. Yeah, it's maybe the part where this is very similar to the cicada example, where actually the source is the same, and then it's working together. But when you put the picture on top of music, difficult. That's my own. I don't know. Maybe some other want to express it.
Completely different question.
It depends.
Sort of thinking about it. The question is, in your opinion, what kind of, well, it's kind of a two-part question. In your opinion, what kind of contemporary music do you think will stand the test of time? And this is related to, do you think it depends on how much of the, do you think it depends on how much more people will learn to listen to a certain thing? For example, atonal music, starting from Mocartu. Do you think that, he has stood the test of time, but people are doing 12-tone music very differently now, of course. But,
well, there are many answers. One answer is, well, I can't see the future, I can't predict the future. The other answer is, I can imagine, but my imagination is limited. Have you ever read a book on contemporary music, new music, from 1950s to today?
I read The Rest Is Noise.
Okay. Any other history of music from 1950 to today?
Not specifically, but I can.
Okay, because I would like to ask you a question, because I have many. And what struck me so much is that these are music history books, okay? So they talk about serialism, the hardcore years following the war, integral serialism, and all that came after that. A lot of those names. Now I'm 55, so I have I have, let's say, 35 years of time perception, which is very little. You will find this name on any book as being a seminal composer. Do you hear his music? And so many. I mean, I'm not judging the music, but I'm certainly questioning what is the music remains in time. Now, within 30 years I can say, well, I can ask myself, why is ARÄNA music not performed? Of course, there are many reasons. It's too complex. There's the music industry, which is always bombarded by pop, or modern pop, I would say, cheap ways of selling and listening to music. Techniques. So that is playing against us. So I'm not in a position to say, is ARÄNA not being played because his music was not that good? Or not? I can only evaluate from my parameters of quality if that music was good and if it was really important. The same thing for Cage. I was very much into Cage, in the 80s. At some point I started to question a lot of things that John did. And what will remain of Cage? Right now there's a big, cages everywhere.
4 minutes and 36 seconds remain.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, of course, you can say it has triggered, but I tend to see Cage much, much more. As he said oneself, he said, what I'm interested in is to open new windows and to look inside. So that's more curiosity. His father was an inventor. So I can see the inventor, the curious person wanted to know. And he said to me, and he said to anybody else, I mean it's official, he didn't listen, he didn't hear the music that he was playing, that he was composing. He composed it because he wanted to hear it. So, I mean, this is really an important factor. So up to which point is that attitude really musical? Traditionally speaking, you would say, no, that has nothing to do with music, because we are used to another thinking of music, another perception of music. But meanwhile, society grows. The things that we are doing today would have been unthinkable. Think of the technology, unthinkable 50 years earlier. So the parameters of evaluation are changing. I already feel myself being too old and out of real contemporary thinking. When I see a 20, 25-year-old composer or media artist perceiving music, I realize I'm very old. Gosh, I feel really conservative. So it's difficult. It's because the meaning of music has changed, of the word music has changed. If that changes, then of course everything else that comes with it changes. So what do you mean? Do you mean a music that is emotional? I think that will remain always, yes, because we are emotional creatures. That's for sure. You think a music that is scientific? I had an example by Xenakis. Well, it's interesting. I think it will remain because it challenges me, because it shows me how much you can do through stochastic procedures. Surely. Does it touch me? Not really. But do I need to be touched in order to evaluate music? Sometimes I think it's more on the yes side, sometimes on the no side, but surely it was important as Cage that have opened up new horizons in the way we listen to music. So there is something there in the non-emotional approach to music which will stay. Because music is also a science, we must be fair. It's also an artistic form of acoustic rules, which is physics. So we shouldn't deny that. So I think the two levels, that's how I see, will always go and grow side by side.
I think it was a nice chord for finishing the piece. Thank you so much.